Caitlin Clark has added pressure to the March 10th date for the WNBA CB talks and added pressure to the WNBPA to get a deal done.
In the hyper-aggressive, multi-billion-dollar arena of corporate labor negotiations, there's a critical psychological difference between an ordinary deadline and a weaponized financial ultimatum. For months, mainstream sports media has framed the WNBA collective bargaining standoff as a routine disagreement over revenue-sharing percentages. The narrative was simple. The players' union would hold firm, public pressure would mount thanks to the Caitlin Clark phenomenon, and eventually billionaire ownership would cave. The assumption? The owners needed the 2026 season revenue more than the players needed a deal, meaning the leverage supposedly sat with the union. But inside executive boardrooms, where spreadsheets matter more than social media trends, a very different strategy has emerged. Ownership hasn't been gently negotiating. They've shifted tactics. What's unfolding now isn't a debate. It's a calculated pressure campaign designed to fracture union solidarity. The league has deployed a classic corporate maneuver: create internal urgency, tighten the timeline, and force the rank-and-file players to question their own leadership. And here's the twist. The unprecedented spotlight surrounding Caitlin Clark isn't being treated as a shield for the players. It's being used as leverage. A ticking clock. A financial countdown tied to momentum that ownership believes cannot afford to stall. Welcome to the real breakdown. To understand the anxiety now gripping the Players Association, you have to examine the actual timeline ownership just placed on the table. Media outlets keep pointing to the May 8th season opener, implying negotiations can stretch comfortably into late April. That's an illusion. Professional sports logistics don't operate on opening night optimism. They operate on hard operational deadlines. Training camp scheduling, arena bookings, broadcast coordination, travel contracts, marketing rollouts, sponsorship activations. Those systems don't flip on overnight. They require lead time. And once those internal trigger dates pass, salvaging a season becomes exponentially more complicated. The league's front office has delivered a blunt reality check. The true deadline to save the season arrives far earlier than fans realize. And when that internal clock expires, the pressure won't land on ownership. It will land squarely on the players. This is no longer a philosophical debate about fairness. It's a high-stakes test of endurance, messaging, and financial tolerance.
They delivered a stark ultimatum to the players' union. A deal must be reached by March 10th if the season is to start on time, according to a
March 10th. That's the real deadline. And it isn't some arbitrary scare tactic designed to rattle the union. It's the final mathematical threshold where operating a professional basketball league remains logistically possible. Look at the current reality of the WNBA's infrastructure. More than 80% of the league's players are unrestricted free agents. The rosters are essentially empty. Two brand-new expansion franchises in Toronto and Portland paid massive entry fees. And at this moment, they don't have a single player under contract. Between March 10th and the May 8th season opener, less than 60 days, the league would need to execute an expansion draft, conduct full-scale free agency, relocate dozens of players across the country, hold the collegiate draft, open training camps, and run a preseason schedule. None of that can happen without a legally binding collective bargaining agreement. You can't sign free agents without knowing the salary cap. You can't trade draft picks without clarity on designation rules. You can't build rosters without defined financial parameters. Right now, the league is structurally frozen, and ownership's message is blunt. If a deal isn't signed by March 10th, the season becomes operationally unworkable. Games get delayed. Arena dates are lost to concerts and other events. Broadcast windows collapse, and player paychecks disappear. But setting a hard deadline is only step one in a high-level corporate negotiation. Step two is where pressure intensifies, the financial strategy often referred to as an exploding offer. Owners understand something fundamental. If their 15% revenue-sharing proposal sits on the table indefinitely, the union feels no urgency. If players believe the same offer will still be there in April, they can afford to wait, hoping ownership blinks first. To break that sense of comfort, the dynamic has to change. The clock has to hurt. The cost of waiting has to increase in real time.
Increases, but no revenue sharing movement. If you do not accept this deal by that day. Every day following.
Every single day after the offer is made, the terms get worse. That's the essence of an exploding offer, and it's one of the most intimidating tools ownership can deploy in a labor standoff. It shifts the balance of power instantly. Instead of a static proposal sitting on the table, the clock itself becomes a penalty. The message is simple. Here is today's offer: a defined salary cap, defined housing benefits, defined minimum salaries. But if this agreement isn't signed by midnight on March 10th, the terms begin to change. March 11th, the salary cap drops. March 12th, housing concessions are reduced. March 13th, minimum salary guarantees shrink. Whether those specific adjustments happen or not, the concept is what matters. The deal deteriorates with time. Once an exploding offer enters the equation, the psychology inside the locker room transforms. Players are no longer just negotiating against ownership. They're negotiating against a ticking clock. Every passing day carries a financial cost. Superstars with major endorsement portfolios can absorb that pressure. They have outside income streams and long-term security. But role players, bench contributors, and minimum salary athletes often depend heavily on league paychecks. For them, delay isn't symbolic, it's personal. And that's where the strategy becomes most effective. The pressure stops being external and becomes internal. Instead of unified resistance, you risk division. Some players push to hold the line. Others push to secure the best remaining deal before it worsens. The conversion shifts from principle to practicality. In high-stakes labor negotiations, that shift in psychology can be decisive. The clock becomes leverage. The cost of waiting becomes real. And urgency replaces solidarity. That's the brutal logic behind the exploding offer strategy, not just changing numbers on a spreadsheet, but reshaping the emotional dynamics of the entire negotiation.
I love that strategy. I used it with players all the time. You don't want to agree right now? Your next offer is lower.
That's the punishment for not doing things on my time. That quote captures the cold logic that often defines high-stakes corporate negotiations. While the sports media prefers to frame the WNBA as a collaborative partnership built on shared growth, ownership ultimately evaluates the league through a business lens. To them, it's a commercial asset. The players are part of the operating structure, essential but replaceable. And right now, from their perspective, that structure is threatening financial stability. Ownership understands something else very clearly. The entire sports world is waiting for Caitlin Clark's sophomore season. The spotlight is enormous. The union believed that spotlight was leverage, a protective shield. The assumption was simple. Ownership would never risk canceling a season centered around the league's most powerful cultural and commercial force. But ownership flipped the equation. Instead of treating the Clark spotlight as a vulnerability, they turned it into pressure. By establishing a hard March 10th deadline, the message becomes blunt. We are prepared to delay or cancel this season if necessary. Are you prepared to be seen as the reason it happens? That reframes the narrative entirely. If negotiations stall over revenue demands, ownership claims are unsustainable, the public relations burden could shift toward the players. Fans, sponsors, and media outlets may not dissect the fine print of percentage splits. They'll simply see a lost season at the height of momentum. At the same time, the financial pressure intensifies through tactics like the exploding offer. The union faces a dual squeeze: external perception and internal economics. But there's a critical rule in high-stakes negotiations. If you draw a line in the sand, you must be prepared to follow through. A deadline only works if the threat behind it is credible. The next move determines everything. Drop your analytical thoughts below. And if you want deeper breakdowns of the business mechanics, leverage plays, and corporate strategy shaping professional sports, subscribe and turn on notifications. This channel doesn't do surface-level narratives. We examine the numbers, the incentives, and the power dynamics behind the headlines. I'll see you in the next breakdown.